Hey everybody, welcome to ThaxCast. As always, my name's Harold. Thanks for coming by. So, first of all, I have a couple of videos up on my Patreon page that are at the $1 up and level, so you can go here to my Patreon page, and anything at the $1 and a level donation will get you access to those videos. The most recent being of me on a hike that I went on recently that pretty near killed me, it feels like. It's a little fun video that I hope you enjoy if you go to look at it. But for today, what I wanted to talk about is another book series, the Mistborn series. Now, I have talked about the Mistborn trilogy before, and that's the original trilogy. This is the Wax and Wane series that came later. Now, they sort of separated. They call that the trilogy, and they call this the Wax and Wane series, but it's all part of the same universe, and the Wax and Wane series is heavily dependent on your knowledge of the original trilogy. So, it's not a great place to jump in. It is highly recommended that you go back and read the original trilogy first. That being said, if you haven't read the original trilogy, you can check out my review of the original one, or you can just go read it and make your own decisions on it. The Wax and Wane series begins with the Alloy of Law. Now, that was released in 2011, which is 3 years after the end of the original trilogy. So it's about the same kind of release time that you would see in a normal sequel. So it's interesting that they consider it sort of separated from the original because it did come out so relatively soon after the original. There's currently 3 books in this series, with a 4th one being written right now that hasn't released yet. It happens 300 years after the conclusion of the original trilogy. The books are centered around Waxilium Ladrian and Wane. Waxilium, or Wax, is a descendant of Breeze from the original trilogy. He's in his 40s with 20 years of being a lawman in the Roughs, which is basically similar to the American Old West. During his time in the Roughs, he picked up Wane, who ended up being his deputy. Wane is a master of disguises and accents. He can blend into almost any group and pick up on any accent. This series takes place on a planet called Scadrial. Now, right now on Scadrial, according to these books, the setting is very similar to the early 1900s Americas. Guns are still pretty popular. Horse travel and train travel is real common, but motorized vehicles are just starting to hit the scene. There are also several new religions. One is devoted to harmony and called the Path, or they are the Pathians. There's one dedicated to the survivor called the Church of the Survivor, or Survivorists. Then there's a lesser-known religion called Sliverism, revering a character most people in the book simply know as Death. And there's one religion devoted to an old god named Trell that didn't really come up in the original trilogy either. The book opens on Wax investigating a serial killer with his partner and lover Lessie. Now, that's about as much as I want to give you on the total plot, but I'll give you a little bit of details about the setting and the book styles and the writing and everything. But I don't want to give you a lot on plot because I want you to be able to read that for yourself. The Wax and Wane series introduces Twinborns, which are the people that have the ability to use feruchemy and allomancy, but only one power of each. Mistborns are basically a myth, and the bloodlines have become so thin that even Twinborns are rare, and there are no known Mistborn. They have also been experimenting for the last 300 years on different types of metals and abilities. Now there are so many metals in use that it's hard to keep track of them all, and if you get confused, don't worry, because in the back of the book, they have a companion guide that talks about all the different metals that are in use for the different powers, feruchemy, allomancy, and so on. It's written as like an observer of somebody that has been taking notes of it, so it's an interesting take because there's also a little backstory that may be telling the origins of who's been taking those notes. Similar to the original trilogy, there's a kind of a heist feel to parts of it, but it feels a little bit slower and like it's a little bit less focused. It feels like there's a lot more downtime, and it's sort of like the Da Vinci Code where you spend time trying to figure out different things, part of a puzzle to try to figure out what's the next move and what you're going to do. To me, it's just not quite as compelling as the original trilogy. There's a little bit less character growth, but a little bit more backstory. But the backstory doesn't give you a whole lot of growth. It just tells you, because of these actions, this person is this way. And so I miss kind of the deep character development. There is some, and the character that develops the most doesn't develop until later in the series. And it's a shame because they treat that person as sort of a minor secondary character for most of the series. But that person does get a lot more interesting, and I really am excited to see more about how that character progresses in the next book. Sometimes the books feel a little bit unfocused, and they're not because they do ultimately drive towards a center point, but it doesn't always feel like it had the right direction or maybe the right time frames. All in all, the story is good, but sometimes it feels a little slow-paced, and I found at times that I felt like I was having to force myself to continue reading so that I could get to a part that was more interesting. Towards the end of the series, it really starts to ramp up, and it leaves you on sort of a cliffhanger. It's not a sharp cliffhanger, but it sort of leaves you with the feeling of, man, I really do want to read the next book. So when the next one comes out, I'll definitely be buying it and giving it a read to see just how much I like it. And if it caps off the series, I'm going to see if it really is a good ending to it, or it may just be a continuation in another part of the series. So we'll see what happens when that comes out. If you've read the books, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments. If you haven't read the books, let me know in the comments if you're even interested in reading them. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. As always, your subscription and sharing the video would be appreciated. Remember, you can go to my Patreon page, and anything at the $1 or above level will get you access to those Patreon exclusives, and there's other tiers that you can subscribe to as well. As always, thanks for coming by, be good to each other, and have a good one.